Welcome back to another episode of Building Confidence. And today's episode, I sit down and I talk to Brendon from Big Action Baits. But I just wanted to give you guys a little intro and say that Brendon's feed or his internet connection was a little bit dodgy. So the video part's not great, but the audio's good. So I salvaged as much as I could because I think he's got a really cool bait. I don't have one here. I did try it last year. We're going to touch on that. And as of time of recording, he will be at the Wausau Musky Show in March. He'll have some available there. And it's a really cool, unique take on a glide bait, which we will go in a little bit more in depth. And glide baits it's one of those baits that I struggle with. And we talk about that and why that is for some people that glide baits either work or don't work. But I'm glad you guys enjoy these building confidence segments, and we have a lot more coming up. Brendon gives just a wealth of information about how to use them, how he builds them, and the thought process behind what ultimately led him to do it the way he does. And I think there's some really cool, unique things in here that you guys will enjoy. So let's go check out my conversation with Brendon from Big Action Baits. Welcome back to another in-studio episode of Building Confidence. I'm here with Brendon from Big Action Baits. And today, Brendon is on the far west coast of Canada, which I don't think there's a whole lot of muskies out there. He might be the only one building baits out on Vancouver Island, which is kind of cool in of itself. But he just got back from the New York Musky Show, I believe, is the one you just got back from. Let's start there. What was your reaction, and what was the reaction to your baits like at that show?
Yeah, so the New York Muskie Show was the first show I've ever had with my own booth. So for me, that was something where I had no expectations. I had no idea what I was getting into. It was pretty wild. It was super cool. I mean, for me, I got in there, set up. It was a hectic 5.5 hour flight across Canada, then a 5.5 hour drive to New York. So it was definitely a mission doing it through blizzards and stuff, but incredible. The support was awesome. Waited in line to come say hi, which was really cool to see. Like people literally like ran to my booth or like got to my booth to just wait in line just to get to it so that they were able to get one of my one-offs.
So coming off the back of that first show where you get that rush of people and that adrenaline rush, I can only assume as a bait builder, of like, people want my stuff, that has to be really cool. We've been at some shows and I've seen it firsthand at Odyssey when people come rushing into the hose bait booth and to Rover last year. From a bait builder perspective, what did that feel like, being that it was your first show and being that you're new in the musky space, even within that tight knit community of boutique bait builders? You're still somebody very new. Your bait's got a lot of fish last year, but what was that emotion like for you? And then we can kind of touch on the baits a little more here.
Yeah, I mean, like they did the countdown in the show. So the countdown, they said doors open. From there, it was one of the most like stressful, nerve-wracking things. I didn't know what to come, right? And to be able to talk to the first couple guys, yeah, it was pretty awesome to hear that people were really liking it. Yeah, it's only been like a year with these glides. And yeah, no, I came in with a full table full of baits, which was pretty wild, and walked out of there with 3 left. So almost sold out completely. Sold more than half the first day. Actually, like the first hour or so, I sold about half. And then yeah, no, it was definitely pretty wild to like. I was talking to my girlfriend about it. She was at the booth with me. We were discussing it, and she said it was hectic trying to bag up baits. When she was like, people just kept picking baits up off the table and giving it to her to bag it up. And she's like, she said it was a really like a whirlwind to try and get all that kind of sorted. And then I'm personally just trying to talk to everybody because I want to meet everybody. There's people I've talked to on Instagram or social media, or like people that just like came up because they said they saw the video of the baits or saw it on the post on the New York show. Yeah, it was it was definitely overwhelming to see the support. I was very, very, very impressed and very like, I don't know, I feel good about it because like it means that people like the baits that are kind of getting out there right now. So it was pretty awesome.
The reason I really wanted to talk to you today is you came onto my radar a little bit over a year ago. I had one of your glides from last year, and unfortunately, glide baits being what they are, they can be temperamental, finicky, and some people have just the absolute easy way of doing it, and other people they struggle. Glide baits for me have always been a struggle, and certain type of baits work really well, and other ones I have to struggle with a bit. And I just recently did an interview with John Betty from Stealth Tackle, and I'll link that down below because he gives such a wealth of information on using the correct leader for the correct bait. And I'm guilty of that. I'm guilty of just whatever I have on for a bucktail or a rubber bait, I just clip a glide bait on and I hope it works. And I know that sometimes is not the case. But can you show us a couple of your glides? I'm going to include a picture of the one that you sent me last year. And in a cruel twist of fate, I could not get it to run to my satisfaction. And you asked me to hand it off to one of your friends that was up on Lac Sewell. So I did. And literally 2 days later, your buddy sends us this picture of a 54-inch fish on that bait that stupid old me couldn't get to work. And that's a bit of a cautionary tale when it comes to glides, that just because you don't get it to work the first time doesn't mean there's a problem with the bait. It's about technique. So let's talk a little bit about that, Brendon, and your bait specifically. Maybe show us a couple, and then let's talk about, and I do have some video here on how you run them, because I do think there's something very unique about your baits.
Yeah. Well, my glides in general, so they're a lot of them are 8 inch. I tried well 8s, 7s, and now 5.5s will be slowly coming out. I build these glides for a wider glide action now. I consistently they rattle as well, quite well. And I built them to do a wobble.
So that's your video right there off of Instagram. I believe it's got like a million views, which is pretty crazy, but it shows that flutter on that fall. And I do think that's really unique to your bait. And I've heard you talk about what you can do with your bait as it gets closer to the boat. And again, I think that's what separates your bait from a lot of what I would call just that throw out and crank it in and just have it go back and forth type of glide baits. Rich Reinhardt calls them hypnotizers because they just in and out and in and out. I think yours has something unique, so maybe touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, so yeah, the video is pretty crazy. It's almost at 2 million now. I was looking at it yesterday. It's hilarious. But yeah, no, what I did with these glides to get them to wobble as heavily as they are and rattle. One thing I noticed for my personal is that when I'm bringing in glides, I suck at doing a figure eight with glides. It's something like we all know glides get follows fairly consistently. They're a solid. They move neutral fish and possibly negative as well. Um, but one thing is, I knew for myself, I suck at the eight. So because of the crazy wobble that these have and how they rattle on the drop, I've actually learned to be able to just and listening to other guys as well, learn to just open bail at the boat. So once you're like 5, 10 feet away from the boat, just open bail, let it wobble drop, and from there, I was actually able to jig up a 45-inch muskie, um, pretty solid, very thick muskie in on opener with my glide. So something that's super weird. I just turned it a follow into an eat just from opening bail. So yeah, that's one of the things where I myself thought it was pretty wild to see one of these glides actually do exactly what I hoped that they would do. So it'd make it easier for some people if the 8 isn't working out too well, or if they're following in the 8, you bring it in and they start dipping out on it or leaving, just open bail. And that 45, actually, surprisingly enough, it was in the middle of the night. I caught that one at like 11:30 at night. I caught like 8 out of the 9 muskies I caught were at night, on my Cedar Lake trip, which was pretty wild to see in like the 4 days or 5 days.
That's pretty unique in especially with a glide bait because for me, I typically would use a glide bait exactly like you say, kind of search mission, right? We're trying to find fish that maybe are neutral or negative. And the knock on a lot of glide baits is you get them to the boat. All you can do is kind of walk it around, almost like you do with a Suick. The only thing with maybe like a Suick or a jerk bait like that is you can kind of dead stick it. A glide bait that just doesn't really do it, and depending on how a glide bait's weighted, a lot of them will fall, whether it's tail first or some will fall nose first, and it's just a style of bait that you can't do a lot. Maybe the only exception is the Conklin glitch pedigree. And one thing that I know Mike Conklin talks about with this bait is that when you get close to the boat, if you have a follow, you can straight retrieve it, and it almost just does like a little nose wobble coming in, and it turns it into almost like a mini crankbait. So you do have some more options. So it's interesting to see guys do different things with glide baits. And off air, you were telling me that when you built your glide, you didn't have any preconceived notions in your head. Tell me what you went through or what the idea process was behind building this bait, because I think what you told me off air was really key to helping people understand how a glide bait works.
Yeah, well, for me, I've never thrown a glide before. Like I had no idea what they even looked like. Or like I've seen like pictures on of the hellhound and stuff like that, or the manta, but I never really worked one before, and so building this glide, I had no idea what it's supposed to feel like. So I ran it the way I wanted it to feel for me. Same with like how I came across the wobble. Like I didn't know glides don't generally wobble like that. Um, so it was kind of an interesting thing watching YouTube before to learn how to build the glide. I learned that like eyelets generally have to be in the center of the glide for them to work and run. The way I shaped my baits, they are similar to like a pike in a way. Like you got the long head. You see, like, yeah, exactly. A lot of the glides all have a really centered eyelet. My eyelet, I set it up low on the bait. Every single one of my glides will have that. Even my 5.5 inch, my 7 inch, and that 8, they all have that lower eyelet. The way I did it is it runs absolutely like phenomenal with that eyelet down there. A lot of the time as well, you'll notice if you bend the eyelid up or down, it's actually going to change the action of the bait completely. A lot of the time, like if someone accidentally like knocks into knocks the eyelid and ends up bending upwards, from there, really what you're going to do is when you start working it, you're going to notice the glide itself want to start flopping up and down or inconsistent, doesn't go side to side completely. So then generally, if a glide starts doing that for some reason, take a look at the eyelet. At least for mine, all I do is I bend them either like right now I have them set up perfectly, but if you end up accidentally messing it up a little bit and bending it either way, just bend it a little bit, like a couple millimeters. It'll make a huge difference from a bait that's flopping up and down or inconsistent side to side to being able to take those long, wide actions. So
That's interesting too. When a lot of people talk about glides, they talk about their favorites. And I always think glides come in a couple different styles. You have your classic Hellhound and Phantoms that are just so easy to work. And like the Hellhound, this is one from Wicked Deadly Outdoors, and it has these stabilizer wings or fins on the back, and that helps it from rolling over. Surprisingly, this one, the way the weight is, it comes in, and I'll show a quick video of it here because this is actually one of my favorites. It's really easy to work, but it has like this nose down attitude on each side of the pull that I really like. But I find there's those really easy to use glides, and then there's some like the Conklin glitch and the glitch pedigree. There, it's almost like a hybrid. It does glide stuff, but it kind of does twitch stuff. And then there's some glides that are maybe not niche is the word, but they're a little bit more finicky. You got to have the right setup and the right technique. And the one of yours I had last year kind of fell into that category. I have one from Keystone King called the Secret Weapon, really cool little glide, but I just couldn't find the sweet spot for it. Talk about the gear you use, the leader especially, how you hook that up, and something you had told me off air about slack line versus tight line. I think these kind of things really will help people understand where your glide's coming from and how to get the most out of it.
Yeah, like you said as well, like glides all have their own temperament. They have their own um, situations to use. They have their own action. They all have their own like personality per se. Generally, when I'm testing baits, I'm using whatever I have on my rod at the moment. Right now, it's like generally I would for a glide like usual it would be the solid wire, and then I'll do a split ring on top. So that's the best way to run a glide, I find. But when I'm testing my baits, I'm just using snap swivel and fluoro just because it's so much faster to run through 40, 50 baits in a day just to test. But um, with a lot of the actions, like you were saying, like the wicked deadly with the stabilizer fin, a lot of the baits with the stabilizer fin, like the manta or something, you can rip on that thing. That bait's not gonna flip, not gonna roll. It's gonna take its like full on power going left and right. That's why that stabilizer fin is there. That's literally that's why that thing is built there. With my glides, they don't have that stabilizer fin, so they're going to be more unstable, which allows me to get that wobble, that allows me to get that belly roll a little bit when it's gliding. Definitely it gives it a little bit more action, more than just the far right and left. With running glides, there's a couple options you can do. A lot of guys will either do the reel slashes, just quick hits of the reel, brings in that glide. For my glides, it brings it in a tighter wobble. And then if you're using your rod tip, either slide slash pulls to the side or pull straight down, that those pulls will give it its further more powerful glide outwards. If they feel like a little uneasy, it's usually because they pivot quick. And the reason, like the best way to run them if they're pivoting quick is leaving that slack in the line and just tightening slack. So it's pretty much just tap. And what that means is like it'll literally bring the bait to the front. But once you tap slack line, give it slack again. So if you do that, what you're gonna do is you're gonna slap it so the bait comes forward, and then when you give it that line, you're giving that line so that you'll allow that glide to come out. A lot of the time, like a lot of guys will do is like pull it like the manta. But if you pull like a manta with one of these, with a faster flipping glide bait, what you're doing is you're pulling it forward, but then you're still pulling it, and so it's going to keep going forward. So you're not going to give it that opportunity to push on its turn.
I do believe that one thing that held me back from using your bait last year is I had this preconceived notion in my head on how a glide bait's going to work. And again, going back to somebody like Rich Reiner, he talks about in the old days, you got a bait and it came in a package, and there might be something on it like this is how you work a Suick or this is how you work a Hellhound. And even some of the packages for like a bulldog back in the day, this is what you do. And I do think some of these boutique baits, that's why it's good to go to a show and talk to somebody like Brendon at the show. This is what you're going to get the most out of this bait. And I couldn't get the most out of it last year. And I'll include a quick clip here of me trying to use it and kind of struggling.
Oh, it's on.
He's like, oh, you got to try real slow with the rod or with the reel, but it won't. It won't get that classic hellhound like that. Like on short line, I can get it to do it. Okay, stand up higher so you get a better view of it, Cade. And then when you do get a cage that just does the one side, I don't know. But coming off of trying it, and then ultimately I handed it off to your buddy and he went out and caught fish on it. Fast forward a year, I'm a lot more open to trying glide baits, and I have tried a bunch of other ones. And it's a type of bait we don't use enough up here, and I know we need to use more. So I have talked to Brendon. I want to try his baits out again, and I know you've made some changes and you've kind of touched on that. But going into this year, you've kind of told me you've built the baits in such a way that it gives them a little bit more of a wider operating, kind of room there. What what do you tell people when they come up and buy that bait in the booth, or you get a message online?
Yeah. So again, yeah, you're right. Like I changed my weighting system a little bit so that it's a lot more lenient, a lot easier to run for the beginners to anybody that's a professional glide bait from Pennsylvania guy or whatever. Generally, when I see people at the shows, I'm very open about it. A lot of the guys didn't like in New York didn't ask me how to run the glide. Um, I just told them I'm like you can either do the reel slashes or you can do the full rod tip movement down or sideways. But I generally tell everyone they can just message me. I'm on my phone, around my phone 24/7. I mean, I'm building baits full time right now, like 10 to 15 hours a day for this next month. So generally, like throughout the year, people can just message me if they have any questions. But um, I built these glides now with a weight system where anybody should be able to run them. So it doesn't take like that finesse of leaving the slack or running it like that. Like these baits are weighted really well, heavier. They don't like they drop the same speed, but because I changed the body up a little bit to keep them more buoyant, but can still be weighted. They glide further. I got my father who's never thrown a glide in his life, only thrown a few like bucktails and plastics. First cast, he was able to run it no problem. So because of that, I took your suggestions as well with what happened last year and how they were a little finicky and does take a little bit of finesse. I took that to heart and I wanted to make sure that it was a lot easier for anybody else to use them because ideally I would rather anybody to be able to grab these baits and not be discouraged.
That that's great. That's great advice, and that's also great to hear from guys like yourself. And I know a lot of the boutique builders that when they get baits out on the market and people come back with some feedback, they're very quick to react to little things that maybe would make it better. And everybody wants to tinker with baits in this day and age. Change hooks, change this, change that. How big of an impact does that make on a glide in general, or a glide like yours when guys take a bait, doesn't matter what it is, and change those hooks out? Because like I always change hooks out on rubber baits, but on glide baits, to me, that makes a bigger difference. Is that what you would say?
Yeah, yeah. Like to break it down, like for instance, like with these glides, to run it without the tail. So all my glides come with two BKK hooks, 4 rod, and a tail. So the tail itself is right here. They all come full tied tails. To run the glide without the tail, the pivot is going to come really tight, and it does come long, but it goes out in like really fast U-turns. With the tail on, that'll actually lengthen the glide completely. So using baits that come with their either tails, rubbers, hooks, generally will like we weight these like glide baits are such a task to balance that we weight them very specific to what we use. So those 4 rod hooks are a certain weight that now we've already balanced the bait to work with, like the BKKs. You can always switch them and everything, but it's gonna there's a big difference between like the BKKs are short shank. If you do the long shank version of like a mustad or something like that, there's a possibility of those hooks getting caught in the back tail. there's a possibility of the hooks just causing more drag, right? So your glide's not going to perform as good. It's also the chance that there's a little too much weight on the back of a glide that you don't want. Or like if you try to throw a hook on the back of my glides opposed to a tail, they still run, but like they'll still glide, but it's not built specifically to balance like that. Then you're going to start having those issues where hooks are catching on each other or things like that. So um, it is like most glide baits, they're built for what is like given to you guys. So if you get a glide that has these exact hooks, that's generally what they're built for. They run their best performance that way.
I would totally agree. And I think that's something that I know I'm going to touch on this summer when we are using glides and using a bait like yours is that there's a reason these builders spend so much time building, testing, modifying, getting it right. And then to see somebody buy one and then want to change it, or, even in the case of like this glitch pedigree to just change that back blade out, that might not seem like much, but that can throw off the balance of a bait. So I think that's really good information for people to take and remember when they are buying some of these baits. Going into the tail end of show season, you got a couple shows coming up. Brendon, where are you going to be? And after the shows, what is your plan for building and or orders, or where are you taking Big Action Baits in the summer of 2025?
Yeah. Well, last year I had about a 3 to 4 month waiting list on glides. It was ridiculous. I couldn't keep up. I've closed the order list twice last year just to try and keep up and or catch up. And it into my show season prep. So unfortunately, I didn't come up with a lot in New York. I'm going to be going to Minnesota and Wausau. Minnesota's on the 8th, and Wausau is the weekend after. I believe that's on the 16th. So those are the two shows I'm going to be going to. Glide baits right now, I'll probably be bringing about 50 to 60 per show. So still a limited amount. Again, like the New York was 40 and that was 3 left. So with bigger shows, I want to bring more baits, but I'm still trying to push as hard as I can. If I come back with baits after these shows, the game plan really is I'm probably going to try and like raffle them most likely just to be fair for everybody to get a chance with these baits. Because this month alone, I've probably had about 40 to 50 messages trying to get on my order list. And that's already more than I can bring to one show, right? So for me, it's not fair to just let people like if I mess up on an order list or anything like that, or have people wait. I think the best way to get my baits out as fast as I can is to be able to do like 10 of the same pattern, shoot them out, and continue on from there instead of doing custom orders. Because my paint job, I am not a very fast painter, let alone the amount of detail I put in there. It does take time. So after the show season, I don't know if I'm going to do orders this year. So I don't think I can take up the amount of time that it took me last year. So game plan really is to get people out to those shows so that they have an opportunity with these baits. And then from there, it's most likely just raffles or random drops once I get them going. But right now, I'm on the west coast of Canada. I'm actually going to be moving back to Kingston, Ontario. So I'll be back on like Lake Ontario, all the good stuff, Lawrence, Ottawa River, all that fun stuff. So again, I'll be switching up my entire shop. Which moving the shop across country, it's not easy. So I don't know how well I'm going to be able to be or how productive I'm going to be with my baits this year after these shows.
And I do know you'll be up in my neck of the woods, I believe, for opener up on Cedar. So that's going to be cool. I do hope to try and get up there one evening and hopefully we can jump in the boat. Maybe we can do a little filming or we can at least, have a beer on the deck there because you'll be right in my backyard. So that'll be cool. So I'm looking forward to seeing you when you get up here. And when you do come up, even if I don't get a chance to fish with Brendon, I'm going to try and steal one of his baits and I'll get it back to our lake and we'll do a little filming and testing of our own. I get it back to him or whatever the case may be. But we definitely want to try and help you Not that you need a lot of help on the promo side, because it's always nice to have that demand for your stuff. And it's fun for us to watch, because just seeing your story go from basically building a bait, catching a few fish, and then within a year, you're getting this demand for your baits. And no small part to the way the bait works. Your paint work is impeccable. I know the one that you painted based on, or loosely based on, the tiger pattern of the one fish I caught, that was just, that's next level stuff. And it seems like we're always talking about these bait builders like yourself, where it's like guys are taking paint to another level, and it literally is. You guys are artists way beyond the bait building side. The paint work is just absolutely amazing, and it is no wonder guys buy baits, and some guys may never fish them because they just look so cool. So hats off to you on, all your success, and we wish you continued success this year. Hopefully, personally, you get out and do a bunch of fishing, because I know there's that trap of being a bait builder that you don't get out. So I just want to wish you the best of luck this season.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Yeah, I don't know if anybody actually really knows that. The Tiger Muskie, my pattern that was such a pretty decent hit last year, came from your thumbnail of you catching your Tiger Muskie. So if anyone looks at my Tiger Muskie stripes and looks at the thumbnail of your Tiger Muskie, they will see the exact resemblance, to be honest. So I think
That's
that's pretty
pretty
awesome.
cool.
Yeah, you hooked me up since day one. You met me. You got me. I got you a bait way back in the day for musky munchies. I painted for you, and then you hooked me up with Vince at Chaos Tackle. So you definitely would like. You got me to where I am, and I really appreciate it. Appreciate that you're the catalyst of me getting into my paint jobs and working my baits. So I truly appreciate that. And yeah, we'll definitely have to go to Cedar and crush some fish. At least I'll be on there for full moon. So it'll be a good one.
Awesome. All right, guys, I appreciate everybody tuning in. I appreciate Brendon jumping on, and we'll look forward in another couple weeks for another episode of Building Confidence. But today it was all about big action baits.